I decided to build a Tadpole Trike, which is a three-wheeled recumbent. So I started with this and a couple of other bike frames, as you can see. I then needed to cut them up and get the parts from them. So that's what I did, started chopping off. That's the bottom bracket. This is the headset or headstock of one of the bikes. And then I cleaned it up and it turned into that. I then had two cleaned up headstocks, bottom bracket and pivot joint, and of course the forks, which were cleaned up and ready for use. I then took some 40x40 box section and welded the pivot joint in place. One thing I had to do is make the axles myself, so this was some 5mm steel bar welded together to make 1 centimetre, cleaned up, drilled out, and there's your axle. This should give you an idea of what I'm trying to do. So that's the pivot joint and rear suspension welded in place. I then had to put the seat mount in at the correct angle and also weld the joint for the rear suspension to it. I then had to cut the front beam axle. This Evolution chop saw is amazing. And it had to be cut at 22.5 degrees. If it's too low, the degrees are, then your legs will bang against it. Same with if it's not quite right. But I got it cut, got it welded in place, and that gave you the sort of feel of what the bike was going to look like. I then had to weld the steering mounts onto the axle. And this has to be done at a specific angle that it ends up in the middle of the wheel at the very, very bottom. The wheels I'm using are very specific. They're 14mm, 20-inch, 48-spoke BMX wheels. The reason I use these is because they're the only hub strong enough to take a single mount on one side. Anything else would buckle. This was the hard bit. I had to weld it in place at the correct angle to get the wheel straight. I also had to pivot the axle back. If I'm honest, it was a bit of a nightmare, but I got it done and it set up okay. Yeah, it started looking like a trike now. I was quite pleased with it. All the angles seemed okay, all the corrections were done. I then started to weld the steering arms on and put the rose joints in and fit the steering rods. Okay, just done the steering, just to show you it works. There you go. Still got a bit of sorting out to do on it. It needs lining up and sort of tracking correct. It's all a bit wibbly wobbly, needs to adjust in width and size and lengths and everything, but other than that it seems to work quite well. I then had to build the bottom bracket, which I totally screwed up, welded it on the wrong way round, and basically as if I'd cycled with it, it would have undone. So took it apart, re-welded it, put it all back together correctly, and hopefully it'll be okay. You can see the rear swing arms changed. This was me because I wanted a rear disc brake, so I bought another one that had a disc brake on it. I then put the tabs on for the seat. Yes, it is made of plywood, as you're just about to see, but it will be covered and it will be comfortable with a leather or a leatherette covering and foam. It works quite well. It's actually quite comfortable as it is, and you can see here I've also got the front mech on it. Sorry, front chain set. I then fitted the chain, which is 11 feet long, and it's so much tension on the top of the chain, it ripped that chain guide I put on clean off. The pulley worked well, but the chain guide was a disaster. I had to come up with another idea. And this was the first test run. Seemed to work all right. Rattled a bit, but it seemed to go okay. No brakes out and no gears. Works well. So I decided to build a chain feed system. So I feed the chain through a garden hose. So basically it takes the tension off the top, quietens it down, and that stuff is really strong. It's surprising how strong it is, but it worked a treat. And it keeps the chain where it should be. Sometimes the best ideas are the simple ideas, and as I said, this worked a real treat. The next bit was running the cables for the brakes and the gears. I was kind of dreading this. This was going to be a bit of a snake's wedding. I also decided I didn't want to have solid cables straight through, so I welded the eyelets on from the old bikes, as you can see here, so we would have some gaps in it. All in all, that's where I am now. It's a pretty good little trike so far. Got a lot of work still to do on it, cleaning up, tidying up, I've got to do the seat. There's going to be a mudguard on and a headrest and so on, but it works well. It's something I'm quite pleased with, as you can see. I've had a few people try it out and they all seem to think it's okay.